If we could please introduce ourselves.
Christy Rischel, Assistant Clerk.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Driehaus.
Jeff Aludo, County Administrator.
Michael Friedman, Legal Counsel.
Thank you, guys and ladies, so much. I am Stephanie Summerall Dumas, President of the Board. We will start, we have a few things on our agenda, but some very interesting and important items. So we'll start with item 1, a comprehensive report, COVID-19 monkeypox, pre-holiday COVID-19 booster push. So our Commissioner, Greg
Excellent.
Testerman.
Thank you so much for having me today, and happy to give an update. So the first slide here shows a very, very slight increase in COVID cases. We are at 115 cases per day. That's a 7-day rolling average. 2 weeks ago, we were at 110 cases. It's important to note these are only reported cases, so many people are using at-home test kits. So this is not a perfect reflection, but I think it does show kind of prevalence within the community. Using that same kind of data, you can see really no increases geographically throughout our community. We see a couple areas a little bit lower than others, but nothing statistically significant. COVID remains within our community, but at not an alarming rate at this time. What we are seeing circulate within our community continues to be subvariants of Omicron, which include the BQ and the BF subvariants. They both are very good, just like Omicron was, at spreading rapidly around our community, but we are not seeing any kind of significant illness produced from those subvariants, which continues to be good news. And that is further evidenced by this slide, which shows hospitalizations in our community. So a moment ago I mentioned we might not be capturing every case of COVID-19 with the test because people are doing at-home testing. At some point, though, if you do get sick and require hospitalization, these numbers are perfectly accurate because we're testing when you show up at the hospital. We are currently at 124 hospitalizations, 14 ICU admissions, and 8 individuals on ventilators. I know 2 weeks ago there was a couple comments about long COVID. I had a chance to talk with my medical director this morning and just reaffirmed what I knew. And you know, 3-4 months ago we had somebody from the University of Cincinnati Hospital talk about the long COVID clinics. That still exists. It's very busy, as we know, but our doctors are able to treat for symptoms of long COVID, very much like we have always treated for symptoms, even with flu, that might persist for a longer period of time. So if somebody shows up at the doctor and they have a persistent cough as a result of COVID or memory loss as a result of COVID, that doctor's office is likely either to treat them for the symptom or make a referral to the correct doctor to deal with whatever that symptom may be. So while there is a formal clinic called a long COVID clinic here in our community, many people are seeking treatment successfully outside of that environment. We continue to see lots of effort with our fall vaccinations. My team sees between 40 and 80 people a day, depending on the day. We are continuing to go around the community, and probably most exciting, tomorrow we will be here in the lobby of this building, the county administration building, providing vaccinations, all types of boosters. We'll have Pfizer, we'll have Moderna, and we'll have the Novavax as well. We also will have the free at-home test kit, so if somebody wants to pick up one, we should have those available tomorrow. It is open to the public. Public members have to go through a security checkpoint, but otherwise it's a great location to get your vaccine, your booster, before any holiday events this year. Shifting briefly over to monkeypox, here in Hamilton County, since I last briefed the commissioners, we've had 3 additional cases, and in the state we've had 31 additional cases. That said, as a nation and really as a community, we continue to be on a downward trend. We continue to offer a weekly clinic, as well as the Cincinnati Health Department offers vaccinations for monkeypox as well. And then lastly, I had 1 or 2 questions related to international review of disease as it may pop up within our community. And I just wanted to reiterate that the Centers for Disease Control continues to monitor a variety of diseases internationally. There are officially 10 centers of global disease detection, where they work with more than 50 countries to keep an eye out when we start to see increases in COVID, or probably today, most relevant is Ebola. And so just briefly, when somebody comes to our country from Uganda and has just traveled to the country, public health is in a response mode. We monitor that person for a specified period to protect them and to protect our community. So there are different levels of risk, and this has been in place for quite a while, like 8 years. Specifically right now in Hamilton County, we've had 4 individuals travel from Uganda. None of them are at high risk. None of them have any concern, but all 4 travelers report to public health once or twice a week, depending on their risk about their temperatures. And it's kind of that early detection way to prevent disease from spreading in our community. We only have 2, after today, we will only have 2 individuals that will still be monitoring. They're both low risk, but I bring this up not as a method of scaring, more a method of informing that public health does this all the time. Before COVID, we were monitoring outbreaks in daycare settings. We get our information from places like the CDC, and we continue to adjust and adapt based on how diseases are changing within our community. But as a nation, we are continuing to watch other outbreaks around the world and make sure that we here locally are prepared to follow an appropriate response. That is all I have for today. Happy to take any additional questions.
Thank you so much for your comments and your great work as usual. So I am going to ask the question because it was asked of me. I know tomorrow for the free testing is for COVID, but someone asked, what about flu? Are they going to be providing any flu shots?
We do not have flu shots available, and we as an agency have not done flu shots for a long, long time. Typically, that's because there's such wide availability within our community. Personally, I got my flu shot this year at Meijer. I know many people have gone to all of these other types of pharmacies with no appointment necessary.
Thank you so much. I don't have any other comments or questions. Vice President Reese.
I just thank you for your presentation, and now we're dealing with something else. It seems like every week we're dealing with something. Just want to, as we go into this season of a lot of allergies, I'm one of them, one of many people that have the allergies and the sinus. And I know that last year, this time, or the year before, we were saying that those symptoms could be COVID. Are we finding that to differ now? Because there's a lot of, people saying, hey, I got a sinus headache, but it's, they test themselves, it's not COVID.
I think we really always still need to continue to assess ourselves based on risk. Sinus infections, allergies can really very much present themselves like COVID, but it can go reverse as well. COVID can present itself very much like a sinus infection. So if someone is feeling sick, I continue to recommend testing, particularly for COVID. It's easy to do. And make sure that if you're second guessing yourself and you're going around those loved ones or others that might be at higher risk, you use extra caution this year.
Gotcha. And then someone said there's some kind of, for lack of a better word, Z-Pack that is being prescribed if someone has COVID. It's kind of like a Z-Pack, but it's not a Z-Pack. Have you heard about that?
I'm not familiar. There are a couple different treatments available, but I'm not familiar with anything similar to a Z-Pack like an antibiotic.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. No questions, just thank you for coming tomorrow. Commissioner Dumas, I believe this was your idea, and I think it's a great idea to bring this to the county building, allow for our employees to get that 3rd booster, and allow the public to come into this building as well. So thanks for doing that. We'll look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
So our next item on the agenda is Hamilton County 2023 budget recommendations. Our County Administrator, Jeff Aludo.
Thank you, Madam President. So Christy was asking me earlier, she was assuming I was going to walk through the entire presentation again. And I said, I don't know that I would have tolerance from the board on that. So I promise I won't do that today. Thank you, Christy. I promise I won't go through the presentation today, but really this is the board's time more than anything else, just to continue to ask questions, provide the administration with any guidance or feedback on the budget. We can take as much time, as little time as you want. Just as a little bit of a recap for folks who may be watching at home, last week I presented to the board the recommended budget for 2023 for Hamilton County. That's the all funds budget, which includes the general fund as well as all of the restricted funds of the county. Just a couple of small things left out, like some grant funds, and it also notably does not include the MSD budget. So if anyone is watching at home, that process will come just a little bit later. The budget was recommended at $1.2 billion, which is the all-funds budget. $352.2 million is the component of the budget that comprises the county general fund. Has several focal points in it, everything from public safety, economic development, environment, and protecting our local infrastructure, fostering a thriving community for some of our most vulnerable residents in Hamilton County, and also the budget contains recommendations in order to keep our organization strong, including making sure we're making those investments in our workforce to make sure that Hamilton County is seen as an employer of choice in the community. I start most of I think I told the board last week that we meet every other week with new individuals coming into the county, and I've told them continually that we want to make sure that, and I know this board is aligned in this thinking, that we want to make sure that when kids are growing up in this community and they're going to school and they're thinking about where they want to work in this community. I know growing up in Cincinnati and Hamilton County, you would grow up and you'd think, I want to work for Procter & Gamble, I want to work for Fifth Third Bank, I want to work for Kroger, I want to work for the Cincinnati Zoo. All great places to work, but we want people growing up in this community thinking, I want to work for Hamilton County because they do great things, they provide great programs, and they also treat their people well. So this budget is aligned towards that as well. As I indicated, the budget is now in the board's hands. We proposed in the budget an adoption calendar showing December 15th as a proposed adoption date with some public hearings. I know we're still going through some, still working through some details on when all those hearings will be, but we will have those hearings in advance of adopting the budget. I also, in advance of turning this over to the board, I also sent out a memo on November 9th to the board that referenced the different areas of policy that I had discerned and gleaned from the commissioner's individual budget guidance. And wherever possible, I attempted to include consistencies within the recommended budget, where there were things that stood out as individual items, individual policy items of a commissioner that was placed on this memo to recognize that we need some additional policy guidance from the collective board on this. So I just raised that in order to formally integrate this into the process and include it in the dialogue for today. But at this point, Madam President, I'll turn it back over to you. As I said, this is really the board's time to ask questions to the degree that we have answers. Happy to provide answers today, or certainly compile the list. And Assistant Administrator Bergen and myself will get back to you as quickly as we can with answers. So at this point, Madam President, I will turn it over to you, and I'm happy to entertain any dialogue or answer any questions that we can at this point.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Excuse me. As it relates to the public hearings that are coming up, the 29th, the 1st, and the 6th, the 29th and the 1st will be at 1, and consensus is that we will have the one evening meeting on the 6th, and not sure where that will be. So we'll have the one evening and the two during the day. You certainly, whoever's listening, you can call in, you can Zoom if you're not able to come in, and we'll be happy to hear from you. So just let me make some general statements. As you talked about, Jeff, the November 9th update on budget that you wrote, and I have one area in there, expansion of domestic violence shelters in the first suburbs, and I'm going to give more information to my colleagues, because as I had a Zoom call this morning from the YWCA, they are actually the ones who have the shelter, not Women Helping Women. And there's one shelter in all of Hamilton County, and it's in Avondale. And so they said they're able to hold about 70 women, children in that facility, and it's always overflowing. So that was my impetus as it relates to wanting to expand to at least another shelter out in the suburban area. But I'm not going to get specific on my recommendations today. I find myself, as we look at the budget this time, just really looking outside, thinking outside the box of where we want to go, and some creative, we've been very innovative with initiatives, but just some creative things that we can do that we have not done before are included in a budget. And I'll be coming forth to my colleagues to explain what some of those are and hopefully get some of their input. But as I review the budget, I am adding some things that I had asked for the last time, and then deleting some other ones that I think may be not pertinent as we go through this budget this time. And I will continue to provide specificity as it relates to the areas of recommendation for our office. And I'm waiting anxiously for public input to be able to put everything together as my priorities and also the public's priorities. So I will leave it at that right now and not really give any other specifics on where my recommendations lie. Vice President Reese.
Thank you. As I said last time, I think this budget is a good start. Certainly, it leaves room for us to be able to hear from the public. There were recommendations that each of us made. Many of them are in here. There's some that are not. One of the things that I'd like for us to do after once we're hearing from everyone moving forward, I'm looking, for me, is what is a way to give the taxpayers of Hamilton County a break. People are really, really hurting out here. I mean, Thanksgiving is coming and people can barely afford a turkey. And I'm not talking about those who are just destitute. I'm talking about the middle-class, everyday working person who is struggling to make those ends meet in this new economy. So want to make sure that we're creating an environment that looks as creatively as possible, as innovative as possible, to give them a break. So I want to look at, as this budget deals with not just our bottom lines, but also deals with our policy direction. I think we're going in the right direction, but there are some things that I like to see that last year was my first budget, so understanding how it works a little bit better now. I like to know in advance what quarter these initiatives will take place. Unlike other governments that I've served in, which are 2-year budgets at minimum, we have a 1-year budget, so it's kind of like the clock run out at the end. And I just want to make sure that in passing this budget, I also want to look at the quarters of when these things will be implemented. I'd like to have that on the front end instead of the back end, because we had some good initiatives, but they didn't come into the fourth quarter last minute. Now we run out of time. And so I want to make sure that we're tying what's in this budget to what quarter, and then we have, as a board, we have the option also to decide if this should be first quarter, second quarter. So when I notice when we get into the fourth quarter, which is where we're at now, it tends to get overshadowed by a lot of other things that we had not anticipated. We're in the fourth quarter and we're dealing with everything from Convention Center District to now, the Bengals league. It's almost like everybody waits to the fourth quarter, and then here comes a herd of things. Plus, in the fourth quarter, like we're doing now, we're getting ready for putting next year's budget together. So I just think the first 3 quarters are critical for implementation, and I don't see a lot necessarily being implemented to its fullest potential in the fourth quarter. So one of the things I would like to see is, where will these initiatives fall? I like to see us to front load it more on the first quarter, second quarter, third, and then leave the fourth quarter to where we're at now, which is budgeting for the next year and all of these other things that come about. But if you're in the fourth quarter of a policy, you tend to not get enough attention, you tend to run out of time, and we tend to not be able to fully implement it through whether it's press conference to announce it, outreach for people to participate, and then we have these holidays, so it makes it very tough to have something coming in the fourth quarter. So one of the things I would like to see is, in this budget, where do these initiatives fall, quarter 1, 2, and 3, and when we pass the budget, that we'll be able to pass it at the same time with the quarters that we would like to see these things these things implemented so we don't let the clock run out on us. The other thing that, like I said, I'm very interested in, it may not be a budget, but it does affect us, this cancer caucus that I really want to do. I think it's something, all cancer, not just breast cancer. There's funding in Washington for the first time in a long time, a focus on cancer. And I think if we could get the cancer caucus up and running, along with our lobbyists in Washington or what have you, we could be aggressive in trying to bring some of those dollars back home and be able to have a report card every year on what we're doing, how we're doing. And I just believe if, with COVID, no one thought we could come up with anything, and, the best and the brightest came up with a vaccine, and many people are still living because of it. So I do want to see that. I know that's a policy piece versus it doesn't cost us anything, but I'd like to see it in this budget. There are other things that I, look at both of my colleagues, and we'll look and go back and forth, but I'm looking for a budget that gives the taxpayers a break. Now, what is that break? A break in a lot of varieties. I'd like to, obviously I'm for 30% tax rebate. And why am I for that? Because we make the other pieces fit. We never say that we can't do these things for the Bengals or the Reds. We don't even have to win. We say we have a commitment. And I just think the number one commitment as elected officials is to the taxpayers. And if they were told, if they were given false advertisement, I don't know. But I think this is a time, I think it fits our affordable housing, because I'm very concerned that we're looking at new affordable housing, right, to get people in. We've got units that's necessary, but we're going to have more people needing it if they lose the house they already in. So I want people where they're living now to be able to have their home right now, and be able to keep it so that they're not on the streets and we're starting all over. So I think it fits the affordable housing model. I also have some interest. I had brought it up before. We run out of time because this board has put in so many new initiatives and innovative initiatives. But I think as we look at the tax abatement process, it has been brought to my attention, can there be some abatements? I think a council member out of Blue Ash asked, could it be some abatements for fixing up the house you already have? I don't know, but I want to look at it. The other question I had gotten from someone that wrote me, they wanted to know, that reached out to me rather, not wrote me, but reached out to me wanting to know, because we have these abatements for new housing, and then the taxes go up on the people who got the house already there. And could there be some, what he calls reverse abatement? So I am going to meet with Jeff and John and Holly to see what can we do to be able to give the existing homeowner a break as we're bringing in new development and new ideas. I also am very concerned about innovative things to bring in money. We do give money to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that's great. We go after conventions. I'm very familiar with this industry, but we are leaving $91 billion on the table as it relates to sports. Youth, amateur sports is different than recreation sports, which I know Commissioner Driehaus has heavily been involved in. But this amateur sports is like you're paying for these tournaments. People are going into hotel rooms to stay for tournaments. And you have the whole family driving those little minivans all around America, flying in some cases. There's a tournament somewhere, sometime, probably starting also this weekend. And so I wanted to look at, as we look at, it's good to have site readiness, but we got to be ready to put something on the site. And I'm glad to see that some things are finally happening at Swifton, and finally, but it's been years. So I want to see if with the Port Authority, Ready, CVB, and others that come together to look at how do we have something that would be able to tap into the $91 billion. The convention center cannot do it because they got conventions and banquets and all that. They're multi-use. We need something similar to Spooky Nuke, but a lot better. I don't think their business model is all the way. They're kind of the first step, and we could learn from them, learn from what they did good, learn from what their mistakes may be. But we need to be able to have sports is everything. Cheerleading, dance, I mean, everybody's kid is in something. And having people come and book these hotel rooms would be great. And so I'm asking for us to at least take a look with the people that we fund. We fund Ready, we fund the Port, we fund CVB, to be able to look at this as a possibility. I did speak with the mayor of Forest Park, Mayor Brown, and he seemed to be excited for something possibly like this. That's not the only place, but he was very excited about something possibly similar to this. Also, on the 513 relief bus, I would like to have a better, and I've written it out, understanding and policy as it relates to that. This bus was successful. We were innovative. We have people from around the country looking at what we did here in Hamilton County and the people we were able to help. It's based on economics, so the bus must have the economics on it. It can't just be social services. It got to have the economics. It has to be one that you can go and have actionable items. Now, this board, we have passed getting the bus together. It has taken much longer than I definitely would have liked, because when you have something very successful, people usually say, let's keep it going. And the model that we had with thousands of people we've been able to help, it's a mobile Hamilton County, bringing the resources to the people instead of people having to find the resources. And we've gone as far as Cleves and Harrison, Ohio, as well as the inner city. So I want to make sure that this bus that we have that's been successful, that the model and that the amount of people needed. Now, we had in here, we would have a strike team. This is paid with ARPA money, a strike team that would be hired to do it. And we would have a marketing. I want to keep the same model. I don't know why we would change. If we had a marketing model that brought thousands of citizens, why do we change? If we need 10 people and it's in the ARPA budget, why would we change? Because I'm seeing us hire ARPA for other things, but when it comes to the bus, it seems to be some confusion. So we've gotten a whole year to get ready. The bus was not out this year, and it's coming out. And I want to make sure when it comes out, it's coming out great. The bus is to have services inside the bus and then be expanded outside the bus. But the thing is, we're coming and bringing the office to your neighborhood, to your municipality, to your community. And when we show up, we've got the computers that the taxpayers are paying for. We've got the people that can make the decision. We've got the health side of things that can help you with your health. And that is the goal. So I want to make sure in this budget that the narrative is very detailed and that the narrative is very clear and that the launching and the implementation is clear so that when people call from the citizens, I can say, go to the budget, it's in there. Not by just one little line, but by what it's actually going to do. So those are some of the things. I've already talked about the small business. I'm not happy with that. I think it was one of those things, we hurry up, put it together, and just ran off. We got to put some time in it, and I had expressed to Mr. Aludo that I wanted to keep the same narrative that we have for the Office of, I think it's Addiction Office, that I think is very good, is very detailed. It talks about the grants coming up underneath. It talks about the person that's in charge. It talks about their reporting to the 6th floor. I want the same model for the Office of Small Business. We've got grants. But we're all over the place. A grant over here, and this is over there, and this is going out. One message. And then they come in with a report to say, this many businesses, small businesses are in Hamilton County. And this many businesses we were able to help. And this many businesses now have moved into Hamilton County. And this many businesses are doing great. So that's kind of what I want to see with small business as well as the Office of Youth. So I looked at the Office of Youth, and I tried to find how much is in there, and it's all over the place because we throwing TANF here and this over here. I need that same model, and they should come in every year. This is how many youth, and this is what we've done, and this is how many got jobs, and this is how many we done did X, Y, and Z with. And I could go to the Office of Youth with one telephone number, one person, and one somebody that can report to the 6th floor, which is where the administrator is. So those are the things I did express last time, and I'm looking forward to getting the information about the parking fund because it's in 2 different places, and I just need some more clarity because it seems to be funding a couple different things. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of additional comment related to the rollout that we had last week, although the memo has been referenced, the memo from November 9th from Jeff to us regarding some of the things that are not included in the budget. And so I'm wondering if we've got a very brief description of some of the things that are on this document. I'm wondering if we can't get a little bit more information related to these, and they're from all 3 of us, and there's no distinction here. You know, if my colleagues agree, get a little more information as to what the intent is and if there's a cost, and not all of them have a cost related to them, but if there is a cost, what that cost would be related to each of these items. I think that might help us as we move through our conversations about what has not been included in the budget and what we would like to include. So that's the one thing I have. I will once again express my frustration that we're not having a second meeting out at night in the public. It's a majority rules, and so I accept the resolution of the issue, but I am frustrated that we will not have a second hearing out in the community to allow folks more access to those hearings. But I will live with the 3 meetings that have been scheduled and move on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as I said earlier, whoever would like to call in, they certainly could call in if they're not able to come in. And I appreciate your comments. Was also Vice President Reese, when you talked about quarters and knowing when we're going to actually have those initiatives implemented, I think would be a great addition if we're able to do that. I think that was great. And as it relates to what you mentioned, the November 9th memo from Jeff that we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's about 8 items on here. And so we can, of course, I know Jeff will give us the amount of money for each one, and I think it's enough. It's a small enough list that we could discuss ourselves maybe in our next meeting of where we are on it. We can do it publicly, or we can, send a memo in and it will show. But I would like to do it publicly on these specific ones that are not included in the budget. So, okay.
Madam President?
Yes,
Can I ask, I don't know if I got spam or what on my computer. I cannot find the November 9th memo. Could you resend it, Mr. Louie, or staff?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah.
So I apologize. I'm unable to follow along with you all today.
And Madam President, just very briefly, so I'm happy to handle this however the board would like. If the board would like to discuss this in the next staff meeting, and as you said, Madam President, give each commissioner the opportunity to go into a little bit more depth, I think that's great. If the board would benefit from the administration, as Commissioner Dreehouse suggested, providing a little bit more detail on each of these in advance of that, just so we're maybe all on the same page. Happy to do that as well. I wouldn't imagine us putting a lot of detail to it because I don't want to cross the boundary of trying to express an individual commissioner's policy intent. But I think we could probably fill it out a little bit more to just provide a little bit more fodder for conversation. So I think that might be a way to accomplish both goals there.
Certainly, and that's what I was indicating when I talked about the money, adding the money on. But any other clarity that you can provide, I'm sure would be helpful to all three of us.
Sure.
Okay?
Madam President?
Yes.
Can I also add on here, I don't know when, I guess we'll talk about it later, how, I don't know what the structure is. There are some items in here that are budgeted, but I disagree with some of the numbers. So I don't know when we do that. I know that there was a placeholder for ongoing maintenance and not just ongoing maintenance, but programming for the Cincinnati Black Music Walk of Fame. And I thought that number was pretty low in terms of those coming. It's coming from the CFA, but we're putting a lot of stuff coming from the CFA, and this is one of the lowest amounts. I mean, it didn't, everything else in the CMA is, tens of millions, and this is down at tens of thousands. So it's less than $100,000. I don't think that's that would be an accurate number for what would be necessary, software costs, et cetera. So I'd like to, there are some other areas, I don't know how we would do it, but it's not just that area, but there are some other areas that I'd like to maybe move around some of the numbers. It's not an increase, but maybe something might have more that I think could operate with a little bit less, and some other areas could have a little bit more, need a little bit more for operations. I think you highlighted some of your concerns about that as well. So I don't know when we do that, not to take out things, but maybe shift some things around.
I would say, as I indicated, the one memo that you don't have that has about 8 items in there, we can certainly do that in a meeting, a staff meeting. But for those that are watching, this is the real book here with everything in it. So we could not just go through everything during our staff meeting, but I would recommend that as you send in your priorities for your office, that you indicate from what you've read in here where you'd like to have some change, and then we can discuss it then, because it's just, so how many pages, John? How many pages about? I don't know. But so we all, we take a lot of time to go through every number in every area, and I think you're right. There may be some things that, other than this 8 on this list, that we think need to be included, so. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome. Did you have anything? Oh, okay. Okay, so we'll move forward. Jeff, did you have anything else?
Nothing else on the budget, no.
All righty. So let's move forward to item 3, Headquarter Hotel Project Update. Jeff Aludo.
Thank you, Madam President. And I do have some slides, but they are really more placeholders than they are anything else. So I wanted to just recognizing that we've had several conversations about the convention district over the past couple of weeks, or in the past couple of months. We had Mr. Leeper in from 3CDC, and before him, Adam Gelter from 3CDC in to provide some updates on the convention district. There's really several elements to this conversation, so I just wanted to take a few minutes today to carve them out and discern and with the board discern some the next steps on each of them, just so we have a mutual understanding as to where we're going. Some are more longer term things, some are more immediate action, but nonetheless, just to try to make sense of what is a very large project when we talk about the convention district. As the commissioners have all said, we have a lot going on right now in the county. I think it was Commissioner Driehaus a couple weeks ago hearkened back to the days of the public hearings on the big box projects, which were everything from music venues. The board actually held public hearings out in the community to try to figure out what were the community's biggest priorities. And at the time, we heard everything from a new music venue to a new headquarter hotel to convention center expansion, upgraded stadiums. At the time, we were talking about the FC Cincinnati Stadium and parking garages. I think the placement of the USS Cincinnati was even in that conversation. Decks over Fort Washington Way was one of the things in the conversation. So we're now to the point where we're starting to make progress on some of these, or at least in the planning process. And even just this one, the convention district, is in and of itself several projects combined into one. So I thought on this one it might make sense, given the presentation from Mr. Leeper, that we just take a step back and walk through each of the components here and just make sure that we're on the same page in terms of moving forward. So the first item, and again, these are more placeholder slides, is the headquarter hotel. This, even going back again to that big box conversation in the community with the public hearings that were held, out of that came the headquarter hotel as the number one priority of the community, if memory serves. I think the board has established it, at least as it relates to the convention district, as being the number one priority. There was an RFP that was released to a group a short list of developers back on August 30th. Those RFPs were, or responses to the RFPs were accepted by 3CDC on October 24th. The scope of the hotel, again, would be an 800-room headquarter flag hotel to support the operations of the downtown community, as well as to serve as a convention hotel, 80,000 square feet of meeting space, 12 to 25,000 square feet of ballroom space. So we're now heading into the selection process. As Mr. Leeper indicated when he was here last, the concept there being that there would be staff from the county, staff from the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the African American Chamber, and the CBC to meet and ultimately provide recommendations back to the Board of County Commissioners and to City Council on next steps. So I believe the first of those selection process, or the first of those RFP proposal meetings is this week. So the county staff would participate in that. We will keep the board apprised on progress as it relates to the selection process. And ultimately, I believe the board had discussed at the last meeting the concept of a joint meeting with the city. This might be a good time ultimately as we get to the point of making a recommendation to the county and the city, as opposed to doing that separately, that doing that jointly might make sense. I just offer that for the board's consideration to the degree that we are considering that joint meeting concept. We have not done joint meetings frequently with the city, but we have done them in the past. We've done them on larger issues. We've done them for the banks. We've done them for MSD. And we have done them, we've done smaller joint meetings, I believe, with committees of council for things like shared services. And I think there was a shared services summit that was held with the city. I'm sorry. Oh, and we did do a gun range meeting, exactly, out in Colerain Township. Yeah, so they're on big, significant issues. There is precedent for doing that. I would say that this certainly qualifies. So with that, I'm going to take these one at a time. So with that, I'll just turn it back over to you, Madam President, see if there's any comments. But again, I think the concept generally, headquarter hotel attraction, RFP went out, responses received. We're getting ready to go into the selection process. We will keep the board apprised as we participate in that process, ultimately with a recommendation being made back to the Board of County Commissioners and the City Council, possibly in joint session, but at a date to be determined.
Thank you, and I think certainly a joint meeting at the end after this process has kind of concluded, and to make sure everybody is on the same page would be great. I guess the big item for me is, as we look at the headquarter hotel, is it inclusive of the convention center? Is that something as a board we've decided? Is that something that the developers feel as if they develop the headquarter hotel, they have to develop the convention center in the process? It just sort of goes together. That would be the question for me, because we have not concluded as a board that one goes with the other. And so we will have to make that decision for sure. And that's just where I am right now as it relates to the headquarter hotel. Definitely, we need a headquarter hotel. That's why we went through this whole process that we did with the Millennium and demolition and all that. But so that's a really no-brainer for me. But the other component, I'm still evaluating the options. So Vice President Reese.
Thank you. I guess I have several concerns because I don't look at things in, I want us to kind of get away from looking at things in silos. I think all of this goes to the budget of what can we afford. You know, 1 minute we have we have a budget and we say, oh, we can't give the taxpayers 30% because we got to be prudent. You know, we give an image of being broke. And then we come right back with these huge projects with public funding. And even though we say, oh, well, that's going to be we're going to tax the people that don't live here, we still carrying a lot of debt. So my thing is what we would normally tell anybody else that came to us, we would tell them they need to phase things in. We would say, don't go above your means. And I believe before we have a joint meeting, I'm not comfortable that issues that I have raised have been addressed. And if I'm just supposed to be here to be window dressing, then you need to let me know now so I can let the people know that voted for me that I'm just window dressing. I don't understand as someone who really understands this industry. I'm someone who I think probably the only elected official around that has ever expanded a convention center in downtown Cincinnati. If I'm not mistaken, might be the only one around in this particular industry that's been a deputy director of tourism for the whole state of Ohio. Someone who actually helped create the CFA, which has a convention facility authority while we even have money available to even have these discussions. And so I think when I have my questions, it's kind of painted over and say, well, let's get together with the city. Well, before we get together with the city, we need to have a chart of who owns what, who's in charge of what, and who has what money. I'm trying to get my grasp on what does the county own, what are we going to be held accountable for, what money do we have, and what other obligations we have. We have Sharonville, and Sharonville, we can't just lock Sharonville into, oh, the debt you have now is the only debt you're going to have. They may want to do something out in Sharonville and expand. Blue Ash, we've got Blue Ash with Summit going. They may want to do something. Whatever we're locking in is almost a 20-year lock-in. And the city of Cincinnati, and I've been there. If I was on the council, I only got Cincinnati to worry about. But I'm now 49 municipalities, and I might want to they might want to put a sports facility out in somewhere else, Forest Park or somewhere else. So I'm very concerned about tying up future money. Second thing is we had to make a tough decision to become the county with one of the largest hotel taxes in the country. I mean, in the state and in the country. So I'm concerned. I know we're going to get to the funding formula soon. My question to you is, who from the county is on the RFP committee? Is that you, or who is that person?
Yeah, so Madam President, Madam Vice President, so in terms of the selection committee, wanted to have some people there with both development experience, also finance and community development experience. So myself, I think this is a big enough issue that as administrator, I want to be on that. The development of our planning and development department, James Noyes, and the director of our community development department, Maria Collins, would accompany me on that, both with different types of experience, different ranges of experience, both on the economic development, the developer side of things, but also from the community development side of things as well.
How many people are on the RFP committee?
I can get you a firm number. I think 3, 6, 8, 9. I'm thinking there's probably in the neighborhood of 9, but I can provide you that once I know for
Yeah, I'd like to know
certain.
how many people, each person, I'd like to know the names. I think when we're dealing with the public, we have to face the public. But we've been taking money, not ourselves, but the tone has been give money to these unelected bodies. And we don't know who they are. I asked for who is on the board of 3CDC. I'd like to have that. I think the public needs to know who's on these boards, because we're now going into a public sphere. And I want everybody to know who's making the decisions, who's leading the efforts, and what board do they have to report to. So I'd like to get that by the end of the week, and not everybody can get it, but it needs to be out. Who's on the board? This is the person, this is the group that's going to be leading public dollars. Who is on their board? I would like to have that. I also like to know who's on the RFP board. Now, when you're on the RFP board, are you going back and articulating some of the things that we're asking? Or is that out? Because when I had the presentation, and I went back to the video because I wanted to look at it again, they say always go back to the tape. It seemed to have a aura of here it is, take it or leave it. It didn't seem much wiggle room for any of our ideas. No one has met with me, including yourself. I guess today is the meeting. What do I want to see in the hotel? Well, I don't know if the other two commissioners have been called and asked them what do they want to see. I feel the hotel is our #1 priority. I think it should be phased in. I think we have a convention center right now. If we had a headquarter hotel that could get some other conventions, as we make money to go into phase 2, which would be the district. It was said in the last meeting, I never got anything back. I'd like to get something back in writing. It was said as we go to the tape, Mr. Leeper said that if we did not do convention center outdoors with the picnic tables and the umbrellas, that these people who are coming for the RFP, they would not do a headquarter hotel, is what was said. You can get the transcript of exact words. I'm sure the clerk has it. I want in writing that all of these people on their stationery said that they cannot do a headquarter hotel unless we do this temporary outdoor $200 million convention center expansion. I think it is very tough, in my opinion, to spend I wasn't here. I understand what you said. You went to the community. It was the #1 issue. It was the #1 issue before COVID. Tourism was different before COVID. I don't think if we went to the community today, headquarter hotel would be the #1 issue of the taxpayers. However, we're moving forward with it. It just hurts me to ride down to see Millennium Hotels, $39 million, paid for by the taxpayer, well, paid for by taxes that would be coming in that we manage. $39 million, we haven't paid it off yet, and all we got is some green space. And on the diagram that was sent to us, that was in the PowerPoint, I don't have PowerPoint, but I'll try to put it up. The part is red that we own. Okay, this is the part the county owns, 39 million, well, we don't own it. I guess the Port Authority owned it. We just paid for it. But Port Authority owns it. And then this is the picture that they gave us. Some trees, some picnic tables, and some umbrellas. We can't make a dime off of this. I asked, could they go back to the drawing board and figure out something where we can make some money, and it was met with resistance before I could even get it out my mouth. So I'm trying to figure out on this thing, are we just window dressing and rubber stamping a check, or do they really want to know what our ideas are? And for that, I guess we'd have to understand who owns what, because we own Millennium, where there's no action for money, and then the hotel's going to be on a different property, a parking lot that is, I guess, owned by the Port Authority. So I'm just confused. I'd like to see a chart on down here, what is our options? What do we own? What do we have authority on? And be able to understand that when you go to the table, that we're going from the table of the interests of the county and what can we get for what we have done. My understanding is that the street is going to be closed off. It was my first time hearing it I know we don't control streets, but according to Mr. Leeper, that's a done deal. We hadn't even, at least that was the first of me hearing of it. Is that accurate? Has that already happened?
Has that already happened in
Yeah, is
terms
that
of
a
the
done
street
deal?
being closed? Well, I don't think they've closed the Elm Street yet, so I don't know that until that would occur, that would be an action of city council. I don't think that's actually happened yet, so.
Can you find out?
Huh?
I mean, because we're talking about a district, and we're now talking about we can meet together, but then we don't know what's going on. So I'm trying to figure out, from the map perspective, we have an obligation. We got a $39 million debt. We want to make sure we get money to something that's going to make money. What I saw over there was a mural that was up. Is that part of the convention district? That's on our side of the plot?
I think it's on our side of the block. I think it's on an adjacent building, but yes, well, I don't know if that's to be a permanent part of the convention district or not, but.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking, you were the ones at the meeting, we're not. I would be asking these questions at the meeting. I don't want to find out about the property that we're supposedly, I guess the only thing that gives us skin in the game is the Millennium site. And it seems from what I heard from the presentation that there are a lot of things that's already been decided before they've actually been decided. And I just don't want that to happen. So I hope at the table, these questions, because I can't go to the table, that my questions are being asked. One is, I want to make sure, is it true that these RFP hoteliers said they cannot do a hotel? I need it in writing. And that they won't do a hotel, can't do a hotel, unless they get the Millennium site for picnic tables and umbrellas. That's my first. And that they can't do it unless there's a $200 million expansion of the convention center. I think that's very, very important, because that puts us on the hook for some additional dollars that I don't know if, to be honest, I don't think we're at that point yet. The second thing is a chart of, like I said, who has what authority over what land. The other thing is there's been some other developments I think is interesting. Everything about this convention district I'm reading in the newspaper. The Netherland Hotel, I understand, is going into foreclosure. What does that mean? It just so happens it's in the same little area. The Hyatt Hotel, I asked about the Hyatt. The city owns a portion of it. I understand now the Hyatt will be for sale. I asked, could that be a headquarter hotel? And Mr. Leeper indicated, we're working on that right now. That can't be part of this, but we're working on buying it. And then there's a parking garage that's being bought. So it's all these areas of gobble, 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 gobble up, and we're kind of behind except when it's time to pay. So I just want to find out about all these components. Like you said, it's a bigger issue, and find out where we are on it, and then bring us to a place where we can make a good decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Yeah, so related to this issue, I'm glad it's being brought to us again. I just want to reiterate, from my perspective, the county has made a significant investment in the convention district plan. We did have, as I referenced the last time, the meeting with the community to make sure we were on track with what the community saw as a priority, and the convention center district, whether it was the convention center itself or the Millennium Hotel, were the top issues on the radar for us to get involved with, and so that's what we did. And so I think what we heard from the the hoteliers was that with the Millennium standing on the site next to the convention center, there was no interest in building a hotel, a headquarter hotel somewhere else, because of the nature of the Millennium and how it pulls down the market. And so we invested there, significant investment from the county through the TOT, and I stand by that decision. I think it was a good decision. It has spurred all of this conversation. It has spurred all of the activity, because without that happening, we're absolutely nowhere when it comes to the convention center district. And so we are now in a position to be working with the city, our partners with the convention center, to figure out the financial stack and how we are going, where this it's going to have to be phased. It's been constructed as phased. And so, how we move forward with these different phases. And so I'll be interested also, I think we saw a preliminary idea of what a financial stack could look like. And I know we're not finished with that conversation, but I'm very interested in that piece and how what we've already invested fits into that, in addition to what the city has already invested, and how we put these things together and then figure out how to move forward together. The idea about the joint meeting, just let me clarify since it was my idea. So I thought it would be useful, and we've done it in the past, has been referenced, when Mr. Leeper or anybody else has an update related to something that we are doing in joint with the city, the idea is that we do that meeting together so that not only do we hear that presentation at the same time, but we can respond at the same time, and we can hear what questions are being considered at the city, and they can understand what questions we have here at the county, and we can have some interaction there, because I think we operate a little bit in a vacuum when we've got presentations happening at one place and then a similar presentation happening at another place, and yet we don't have that interaction amongst the two bodies that are making the decisions and setting the policy. So the idea of the joint meeting would be to have just a more seamless conversation amongst us about where we would all like to head, because it's a joint venture. So that was the reason I suggested a joint meeting. I don't know how often that would happen, but I think at these inflection points, as was referenced, we've got an inflection point coming up here related to the hotel, and so maybe that's an opportunity. But as there are inflection points, or the financial stack would be another one, maybe it would be useful to have these joint meetings with the city so that we can not have so much of the kind of disconnect between the two, but rather have a joint effort. And it's a joint effort, it's just not as easy, I think, when we're not sitting in the same room. So that's kind of where I sit on this. I'm excited about the opportunities here. Lot of investment, a lot of work on the city side, on the county side, on the private side has gone into this. And I think once we flush out some of these details and are able to move forward, especially with the renovations with the convention center, I think we'll have a product that we're all proud of, and we will all have played our part in making that happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm also in agreement with the joint meetings, but of course, before we have that, we have to have some clarity with our group and with the administrator combined to make sure when we go in there, whatever we hear, if we want to object or say, yeah, that's a good idea, then we need to be clear on that. I don't think, of course, we're not at that point now, but that's where we need to be when we go into those joint meetings. You want to move forward,
Certainly.
Jeff, on the convention center?
Happy to, Madam President. So the next, and some of the questions I think you've asked bleed over into this. As Vice President Reese indicated, this is not an issue to look at in silos, but they all do kind of work together. So some of the questions you've asked naturally bleed over into this. But as Mr. Leeper had indicated when he was here, 3CDC is currently looking at options for enhancing the convention center to support the broader convention district, also to support the headquarter hotel. I think Commissioner Reese had asked a question looking for some certainty around the importance of that expansion to the hoteliers looking to develop here. I think that's a question that has naturally flowed out of this conversation. I know when we were talking even years ago before COVID about the convention district and people indicating, look, even if there's time, money, and capacity to do one of these things, what do we want to do? And the question was, or the priority was placed on the headquarter hotel. That question was also being asked, well, to what degree are the hotel developers going to want to invest if the convention center stays as it is? So that is something that I think, to Commissioner Reese's point, needs to be brought up in the course of these RFP evaluations as well, certainly. The convention center that's, and I'm not going to walk through the renderings or anything like that. Mr. Leeper did a good job when he was here of walking through what they and their architects, Moody Nolan, were doing at a high level. The key thing I wanted to focus on was there was the reference of significant dollars being needed for this. I think it was in the $200 million range to do the convention center, whether we call it an expansion or a renovation, et cetera. And at this point in time, they are still in the process of putting together a financing plan to figure out how to pull that off from a financial perspective. I think he had indicated when he was here that a significant portion of that would include a plan which would incorporate pulling the various debt streams that are out there, consolidating them, whether it's debt that exists on the Duke Energy Center, on the Millennium Hotel, investments that the city has made with their occupancy tax, and anything else, putting those together in order to refinance that in the entirety of that debt stream in a way that would push down costs and open up capacity for additional issuances for the expansion of the convention center. I think he indicated in his presentation that that's probably not all that this would entail, that they were looking at other revenue sources, et cetera. The presentation wasn't specific on those, but I know that he had indicated, and I touched base with Mr. Leeper very recently, who indicated that he would be along with the administration, would be arranging times with each board office to meet regarding the financing plan. The administration still has some questions. I'm sure the city still has questions or will have questions about the financing plan. And ultimately, though, to meet with the board and then to meet back here in public session to review the financing plan and hear those questions firsthand. So in terms of next steps on this item, it would be exactly that. The meeting of administration and 3CDC staff with individual offices of the Board of County Commissioners, both to review finances, the idea for a financing plan in advance of a public session, and also, I believe as was pointed out, to hear just ideas around the convention center itself. I know that 3CDC has an architect on board. From the last meeting we'd had, and I followed up with Mr. Leeper on this to ensure that as we meet to discuss the financing plan, that discussion can also include ideas just generally on program and scope and the dynamics of the working dynamics of the convention center. And he indicated, yes, of course, at this point in time, this is the time to do that. So those meetings would be scheduled over the course of the next couple of weeks, again, culminating in a public presentation to hear more about the financing possibilities associated with the convention center and where there might be opportunities and where we still have hurdles to get over. So with that, Madam President, I will turn it back over to you for discussion on that issue.
Thank you, Jeff. Since it was presented publicly by Leeper, I remember Commissioner Driehaus had asked about what the monies would be for the expansion and renovation of Convention Center, and then I made a joke about did we want him to come back, and I said, yeah, we'd like to see you again. I thought I had said 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure I said 2 weeks, so now I hear about he's going to meet with each individual office and all of that. I know they already have the numbers because I've seen them. So the request is still there for him to come in with the numbers. Now, if he wants to give specific details on what that entails, more specifically, then he can, my opinion, he can meet with us individually, but I'm hearing weeks, and I remember asking him to come back in 2 weeks.
Madam President, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Leeper. I think he would come back as quickly as possible.
Okay,
I think our meetings next week were canceled because of the Thanksgiving. So when I was talking about a few weeks, I was pushing this into either the latest meeting in November or early December to accommodate the board schedule. But I'm sure Steve would come whenever the board.
Would be here. I actually, well, maybe when was he? Was he here? Not last week, the week before.
I think it was the week before.
So I
yeah.
thought he would be here this week, to be honest. Okay, before Thanksgiving. Okay, but anyway, we talked about the RFP interviews, and I heard you say we were going to discuss about the reality of the headquarter hotel. If they did not do the convention center, are they able to do both? Is it a necessity to do both? And I would just say that should be the number one question when we go in. And if they say we cannot do both, where are we? Who are we left with? I think we have 4 that are, 4 companies that are going to be interviewed?
There were four our proposals submitted, correct?
Sure. So that would be on the top of my list, because, as I said earlier, we have not determined if the convention center is part of what we're looking at. And when we talk about 200 million, I just think that's the beginning. You know, with all the things that are going around us with equipment and staffing, and I think you know, of course, I don't know, but I'm just thinking the 200 million is just a start, and who knows? But that's still a lot of money that we're talking about. So that's all I have for the convention center right now. I'll pass it over to Vice President Reese.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to take 2 steps back. One is about the joint meeting. I do agree. I'm not against a joint meeting. I think we got to get ourselves together first. That was my point. I don't think that there were questions that I've asked. I have not gotten any responses back. And then to go into a situation where we kind of dilute some of those issues, I didn't want to do that. But once we get on the same page, I think we then we should have a joint meeting. But I cannot have a joint meeting until I know who is in control of what. So I'm not going into a joint meeting and it's something that the county has no control over, or we go into a meeting and maybe the county does have control. I need to have a understanding from a chart perspective of this district on what the county, what are the things we control, what are the things we're responsible for, the $39 million investment, how are we getting that back? Because they said, oh, we can get it you'll get it trickled down through sales tax. Well, that's the weatherman saying it's getting ready to snow. We'll get that because they'll run the Krogers. We need something very specific that we can go back to on this $39 million piece. I'm concerned that it will become something that 3CDC would make into kind of what they do on the other things. It's a good thing that they do what they do over there, but not if I had to pay $35 million for the property. You know, where we have free concerts and they go get advertisers and monetize the space, and then we're hoping to get a few nickels and dimes off of somebody bought a candy bar or they bought a hamburger. And I think those are very important things to understand. It's also important to understand what is the total picture. If the Netherlands is going into foreclosure, what's happening with that hotel? If the Hyatt's getting bought, who's getting ready to buy it? They said he's working now on a deal to buy the Hyatt. I'm concerned about a monopoly. So when you say next steps in your original slide, for me, the next steps is, one, I want a list of the board members on 3CDC, since they're leading this effort. I would like to see that we have an independent analysis about the hotel and the convention center. The only analysis I've seen is they try to find the worst pictures at convention center and put them up. Isn't this ugly? I mean, you know, come on. Where's the independent analysis that says that if we do X, Y, and Z, we're going to get X, Y, and Z to help pay off the $39 million debt in a world post-COVID? Well, it's not post-COVID, we're still in COVID, because things have changed. So I would like to see where's the independent analysis that says the two have to go together. As we get into, I would also, for next steps, like to be able to provide, since we can't be in the room, we can't talk, we can't say nothing, the only thing we can do is say, yes, we'll fund it. I would like to be able to submit some questions to you and have those questions, and I'm sure the other commissioners, and have those questions answered and be able to share with us. Since you're, I guess, going in as the mouthpiece for us, there are some questions that I'd like to have answered in the RFP process. And like I said, one of them is what we were told, but I didn't see anything on writing or in the packet you sent us, that these hotel people said they can't do anything unless we do this $200 million expansion. The other thing on the RFP, I would like to make sure that this is going to be privately funded. I know that Franklin County, they have a big hotel expansion. I think it's a Hilton, but it is publicly funded and owned. So I need to know up front: is that the direction we're going to try to switch us to where we're funding it, or will these people have their own private funding? I know verbally they've said it, but I'd like to see something in writing. As it relates to the funding model, and, oh yeah, and I think when you talk about next steps, at least I've expressed reservations. Maybe I need to understand, Commissioner Dreehouse said it will be phased in. So I guess I'm trying to ask you, is it phased in? Because that's not what Leeper said. He said the two got to be going together, is what he said in the tape that I re-listened to.
I'm not sure exactly what Commissioner Drew.
Happy to clarify. So the phasing is that the expansion of the exhibit space at the convention center cannot happen at the same time as the hotel and the renovations at the convention center, because the financing's not there. We don't have enough money, and we're not going to have enough money. And so when I talk about phasing, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. So I want to make sure me and you had the right terminology. When I talk about phasing, I'm saying completion of phase one, get some events booked, and then come back to us at another time to look at if we want to do the outside, or if we want to do, because this is basically expanding to an outside, open space, if you will. I might want to look at how do we go ahead and get a convention center real expansion at a later date, but not commit up front. With that, let's go to the financing. Now, Mr. Leeper came and said that he put up $200 million for this, I don't know if you really could call it expansion, I guess, redesign of the convention center. It's not an expansion per se. It does close off the outside street and allow for outside dancing and collaborating, but it doesn't give us extra space we can make money off of, and that connects the convention center to the Millennium site that the county paid $39 million for. In addition to that, he's estimating $200 million, and with that, he indicated that the city said that they would pay for a portion of the design. Now, the design was presented, never asked us what we like about it. I don't have to say a thing about the design if I'm not voting for it. But if I'm voting for it and I got to put some money toward it, it's just like going shopping. If I got to wear the dress, I want to, I might have some ideas of what I like to wear. But if you're wearing the dress and I'm not paying for it, go get the dress you want. I don't, it's yours. So I've got to get an understanding that are we helping to pay in his business proposal for the convention center expansion. If that's the case, I got some ideas. I've talked to some people who are in this business nationally and internationally, and I'm not sure that design gives us a futuristic look. When you look at the carousel that the Port Authority bought, it's similar, except it only has one hump instead of 3 humps. So we want to make sure that we're doing something futuristic. Now, if you're saying the city's paying for it, we don't put a dime toward it, it doesn't cost us anything, hey, you won't hear from me. But if you're saying that we got to put something toward it, then hey, I'd like to be consulted to ask me what I think and what some people that I heard from think, so that we could try to incorporate it. I didn't see that level of cooperation in our last meeting. It seemed to be, this is it, this is what we're doing, and basically be quiet and pay for it, take it or leave it. I didn't like that type of aura, or, all of us like to put a few little touches. We might have touches, we might not have any touches. In addition to that, this $200 million, it said the city gave $7 million, so it leaves us with a $193 million gap. It asked about who's paying that gap. I hope it's not the gap coming over here. But we have $193 million, and as President Dumas has indicated, this $200 million is the 2022 dollars. When we get moving, we don't know what 2023 or 2024 dollars would go to. When you go to the financing plan, we have the Convention Facility Authorities, also known as the TOT, as you will hear it. It was designed for a portion of the hotel tax to be split where the county and the city. And if my recollection is right, not this particular commission, I mean, not this this particular council, but it already was voted on. They gave majority of their future earnings to a debt service for FC Cincinnati. They basically kind of emptied out, if you will. And they've got that debt, so they don't have a lot of extra capacity. So then you go to our side, and the commission, before I got here, was a lot more diversified, more conservative. I think did a great job. We got, of course, we got Sharonville as a debt. We got Convention Center as a debt. Half of Cincinnati Convention Center. We've got 2 garages, one for the community, but we didn't empty out to FC. And then, of course, there's Millennium. How I describe this for people that's at home, just basic knowledge, it's almost like 2 people, myself and someone else. I got $2.50 in my account, for example, but Jeff Aludo got $1 million in his account. And then I go to Jeff Aludo and say, Jeff, let's refinance and come together and have a joint account. And you'll have a debit card, and so will I. And let's work together. But I'm only bringing $2.50. He got $1 million, but our spending is 50-50. I don't know if that particular finance model is the model that the county would want to go with at this time. So that's what I got from his presentation of refinance, bring it all together, bring all the debt together, and we got some money. We didn't use up all of our future earnings. They did. And now we talking about let's come together and we'll be 50-50 and making decisions at 50-50 on the debt. I don't know if we're ready for that. That's not a good funding model, in my opinion. So those are issues that I have. $193 million debt, a proposed funding model where we come in and go 50-50 at a time when we have a little more capacity in our CFA area or our TOT than maybe the city. No fault to the current council, but they did it before that, and I just don't think that's a good funding model. And it also will tie our hands to any future investments that we might want to see in Blue Ash or Sharonville or other parts of the county. So I'm not convinced on the funding model. So I wanted to say that in advance so it doesn't come to us and say, oh, we got one staff meeting and we got to vote next meeting, because take it or leave it. This is our only chance. Well, if it's our only chance, we'll have to pass. Because I don't know anybody in their private life will go a joint account with somebody with $2 and they got $1 million and they both got equal, they go in a joint account and they got equal debit cards. I don't think anybody would do that in their own personal finances. So that's my thing on the financing plan that was presented to us based on my research, my team's research, and outside folks that's been in the tourism industry as it relates to that. And that's why I think our #1 priority should be the hotel, make some money, book some conventions, and then we can look at something else down the road. So I will have to say this in defense of Convention Center. I want to say this because I was part of the expansion. We have the #1 ballroom, I think, in the country. We had diverse designers. You can go in our ballroom and all you do is put a black tablecloth on the table and it will look spectacular. So I'm not here to say that, oh, our convention is raggedy. It is not raggedy. We have one of the top ballrooms in the country. Our convention center also is, one or if not the only convention center where African-American restaurateurs could come inside convention center, not be charged extra, and have a partnership. So we have some things. We also are the only convention center, might be one other, that has an African-American executive chef of convention center. First time ever. And so while I do appreciate we want to make improvements, I think it's important to also note that a lot of people are doing this for the first time. 3CDC, I asked them when they were here, not the last time, but the first time, have they ever done a convention center district? And the answer was no. So we're on-the-job training, on-the-job learning, and that's why I reach out to others who are in this industry to kind of get their opinion and if there's things that we might be missing. So anyway, just wanted to say that because we have, I think, a pretty good group down at the convention center, and we have some things that other people, it helped us get conventions by showcasing some of the things that we do have that other people do not. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. I have not a whole lot to add, other than what I've already said, other than to say it would certainly not be my suggestion or my recommendation that we go into a joint meeting without the information that we need. Obviously, we need to be up to speed on what is in front of us and be able to understand the financial stack and who owns what before we walk into that meeting. I mean, that's, to me, that's just a given, of course. And before we go into a meeting with the city to talk about the financial stack or to talk about how we progress. So, my understanding of the financial stack is that the debts are rolled together, and we actually have more debt than the city does. And so I view it in a way where I want to make sure that the county is being treated fairly. And so I have asked questions related to, what debt is being rolled in, what is the term of the debt, what would be the dollar amount outside the debt that the city or the county contributes. And so these are the items in question and the things that I'm going to consider as we talk about that financial stack and the questions that I've asked already related to the stack. Because in the end, I mean, I think we should be, and I think we're appropriately concerned about the investment that we will make here to make this thing go in conjunction with the city, and we need to make sure that the county's interests are represented at the table. So, but I just want to say, in no way, shape, or form am suggesting that we go into a meeting where we're not well prepared and we don't have the information that we need.
Thank you. And as we move forward to the millennium, you talk about investment. We were just talking earlier about the city had given $15 million to this whole downtown project, but we've already given over almost $50 million as it relates to the millennium, the property acquisition and demolition and all of that. So $15 million is good for the city, but we've already kicked in almost $50 million from the county. Going to move forward to the millennium. Jeff, if you want to.
Thank you, Madam.
Words.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. It's a good segue. So, and maybe this item should have been first on the agenda, but this is the third of the three items I wanted to talk to you about today. So this, the millennium, as the board is aware, is really tied into all of this. I think Commissioner Dreehouse said it earlier, that it was the acquisition and demolition of that hotel that really makes the rest of this conversation possible. The port entered into negotiations on behalf of the county back in, I believe, 2019 to acquire the option to purchase the Millennium Hotel from Vanderkar Holdings at the time at the request of the county. They did this to enable the removal of the Millennium Hotel from the convention district and to make the acquisition of and the attraction of a new convention hotel possible. The Millennium at the time, and this is just for the public's knowledge, was a blight. It was underperforming as a convention center hotel. It was deterring conventions. It's the level of occupancy tax that was produced from 800 and some odd rooms at the Millennium was less than some of the other hotels in the area that have far fewer rooms. So board policy at the time was to acquire that hotel. Many attempts were made over the course of the better part of 20 years between the city, private interests, and the county to acquire that hotel. The county was involved in attempting to acquire it. As I said, the city was involved in trying to acquire it. Again, all for the purpose of getting it out of the convention and visitor infrastructure of the community. ultimately, this was done. The board, over the course of better part of a decade, had prioritized the building up of capacity in the transient occupancy tax fund specifically for this purpose, to acquire the hotel. This was done, as has been mentioned, at a cost of $36 million. There was also a $2.5 million brokerage fee that was associated with that. That brokerage fee leads me to the point of the discussion today. That brokerage fee was slated at 2.5 plus some costs, plus an additional 5 if there was redevelopment that occurred on the site. Recently, the courts in Hamilton County had determined that the development agreement implied that the demolition of the Millennium Hotel, which was demolished to remove the blight and to avoid safety concerns, but that demolition constituted redevelopment, and as such, the interpretation of that contract is that additional $5 million is owed by the port under the development agreement with the broker. So recognize, and I'd sent a memo on this to the board and a recommendation a few months back, but I wanted to bring this up publicly for a discussion. Given the fact that the port had advanced this at the county's request, and given the fact that had that development fee been known at that point, this would have been included into the initial financing. I would recommend that we advance that payment to the port so that the port can satisfy that obligation, and we can move on with the rest of the planning of the convention district. So I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments from the board on this, but just as a means of drawing to a close our efforts with the Millennium and the development of the hotel and the attraction of the new hotel, I want to try to offer a way forward to make sure that this gets closed out and that we can move forward with the rest of the convention district conversation. So with that, Madam President, I'll turn it back to you for any comments and questions.
Thank you, and you mentioned the acquisition cost. What was the demolition cost?
Yeah, the demolition cost, I believe, was 13.7.
Okay, that's where I'm getting the
Yeah.
50, okay, 38 and 13. Okay, I don't know, this is like deja vu to me, I guess, because I remember, and I'm not going to belabor this, but I remember when I first came, I was told, you know, while I was on the board and with the board, that this is the best decision we can make as it relates to real estate. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with the Millennium. And I remember stating that I did not agree, and this is the worst real estate decision that we could make. And so I still stand on that, that it was not a good decision, but it's done. We move forward. The Millennium has been acquired, we demolished it, and we need to move forward, and that's what I plan on doing. So as it relates to the Millennium, we decided we needed someone to move for us in the direction that the board decided we wanted to go, and the Port Authority was chosen to make that happen. We moved pretty quickly in that process, but needless to say, the board did decide to authorize Port Authority to do what we wanted them to do and take our direction as a board. So with that being said, the courts decided differently as it relates to whether or not we were liable, and so the $5 million is due. And because we had authorized them to be our agent, I think we have the responsibility to move forward with that $5 million. So I'll just leave it at that. Because, as I said, things went really quickly, and that was another reason why I was not in agreement with this whole process. But I am in agreement with fulfilling our obligations as it relates to who we asked to do the work for us, who has the most experience in doing that to lead the way. And so we need to, I think, get rid of this obligation and move forward. So that's all I have to say as it relates to that. Vice President Reese.
Thank you, President Dumas. I was not here. I find I'm in an interesting position because I had no say. I was not here. Even though I was in this industry, nobody came to me as a consultant and asked my thoughts or advice. And now I'm at a situation where we have to make a decision on what's best for the taxpayers of Hamilton County. Now, I understand they said there were some town halls and people said this was the #1 issue. But as I indicated, if you would ask people today, is this the #1 issue? I don't think that would be the case, and we've got to pay today. We also have a presentation here about what's going to be on the site, and we don't really have a lot to say about that. They already got the name for it, Elm Street Park. They've already named it. And we're stuck with a bunch of bills, and people will hold me to a different standard because that's my area. Each of us have different areas, and when we get to those areas, people may hold my colleagues to a different standard on those areas. And some of those areas, I got to kind of fall back because that's their expertise. But this is my expertise, and I can't have us go down a dark hole that I'm in this area, and I kind of know better. So I wasn't here when the original deal, and it's not about the concept of did the Millennium have to go. I think everybody agreed to that. What I'm concerned is one set of rules, one process. My understanding is if you do business with the government entity, anybody that does business, there's always this clause that's in there that says that the government, if we give you a contract to do something, you are the government is indemnified. And I just didn't understand how that doesn't apply to the Port Authority. Because usually when you contract somebody to do something, then they go get subcontractors, if you will, and do their business. It says you're indemnified. I don't know how the Port Authority did not have that clause, but every small business, every business that does business with the county or any other government entity, they have that clause, but somehow they don't have the clause. So on one end, we got them where they don't have to pay taxes because they're doing their land bank. Then they get to own the property. Then we give them the money to pay for the property, and then they don't have to be indemnified. So I guess I got a couple questions, Jeff, because I wasn't here, Mr. Aludo, that I have for you is why wasn't that clause apply? Why does that not apply to the port? Because we got people we do business with all the time that get sued. So why does that not apply here?
That's a great question, Madam Vice President. And I think the fundamental issue here is that when we're talking about an indemnification, this was the development fee that was included in the contract. It was 2.5 plus 5 if, in fact, there was redevelopment on the site. The courts have determined that this constitutes redevelopment. So the development agreement itself calls for this payment. I think if this was, and I would defer to our legal counsel for the more explicit legal interpretation of this, but if this had been something where the port had acted in error or done something wrong, and this was a punitive judgment, I think that might be a separate conversation. But this, in fact, was the court's interpretation of the legality of the contract as it stood. So that when they indicated that both of those payments apply, then essentially the port is just complying with the development agreements. I don't know that it's something where the indemnification.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, why did we go to court? Did we get sued? Usually it's always Hamilton County getting sued. Did we get sued?
No, we did not get, the county did not get sued on this. The port was the entity that did this as the county's, I think Commissioner Summer Dumas said, as the county's agent. So they stood essentially in the county's place on that, and the judgment, as you kind of indicated here, was against the port, not against the county. But this was the development agreement. This was the cost of the development agreement in that contract.
Plus, it also has interest and those kind of things. I just kind of understand. It's hard for the people to understand. We didn't get. Usually, they would pull us in, and we didn't get sued. We didn't get. Were you asked to testify in the court?
I was not asked to testify in court. So no, to answer your question, no, we were not pulled into into the lawsuit or into the suit directly on this, but this was a case where the county had charged the port with moving forward with this, and the port did so under the terms of a development agreement that had a brokerage fee associated with it. A brokerage fee that I might add, I believe the port had negotiated down from what was initially talked about to this hybrid 2.5 plus 5 if redevelopment occurs on the site, and the courts have now opined that redevelopment occurred, that additional $5 million is owed.
Reason why I'm concerned with this is that the port is always acting when we go out and tell them to go get $2 million and represent us to get land. We have in our budget, in this budget you just gave, $2 million. They represent us. So if somebody come and sue, it goes back to us. And I had asked you, I said, well, when they go get this land and we paying taxpayer money, can we be on the deed like they have with the bank? If you go, somebody has the first lien or the second lien, you said we shouldn't do that because we don't want to put ourselves at risk, but we're still at risk and we don't own the property.
Are you drawing the comparison between that, like a site readiness instance and this?
Yeah, it's
Well,
do we own the Port Authority? Do we own the Millennium?
The port technically owns the Millennium property. But I think there's a difference between.
So that's my point. We don't own it, but going back to what I said about these other things. We seem to be the people that pay the bills, but we're never the people that own anything. And when I asked you, I said, well, what would this be different than a site readiness situation? They go get site readiness, somebody ends up suing them, and now they come back to us, and we got to pay, and our name is not on any of the deeds. We don't even own the Millennium. Right now, the thing what we want us to pay a judgment and site readiness, and I asked you, were you involved? You said you were not. Our attorneys were not involved. Nobody knows who said what. I know Commissioner Dumas has said her positioning, but she had voted against it. I wasn't even here, and I don't get no say, and then we get no say about what goes there. They already calling it Elm Street Park. I'm just confused. Either we in charge and own it, pay the bills, or we're not in charge, we don't own it, and we pay no bills. I'm trying to get to that, because that's what the public would be thinking. If I was a private citizen, I would be saying the same thing. What are you doing paying this stuff and you don't own it? You can't determine what's on it. Everybody running wild. And you tell them, well, we don't own it. And then over here, well, they got a judgment. We got to pay it. I'm confused.
No, it's a good question. So I think from the county's perspective, the county charged the Port Authority with doing what it needed to do as a port with certain powers to acquire property, to hold that property tax exempt, et cetera, and to do that in a way that eliminated the Millennium Hotel from the marketplace and acquired for the first time in the history of the convention district the ability to remove the Millennium from the marketplace. So the county charged the port with that and said that the transient occupancy tax would be the revenue source that backed this. So the value the county received for the money that it paid was the removal of the Millennium Hotel from the convention district and the ability to attract a convention hotel to the central business district, which if you've heard folks like Mr. Leeper and others in the community indicate that had that not been done, we wouldn't have a headquarter hotel wanting to site themselves here in the community. So that ultimately, because that's the question that comes up all the time, what value did the county get out of it? What value does the county get for the payment of that occupancy tax? And it's that fundamental market dynamic that the county ultimately gets.
Yeah. I guess that's a very expensive fundamental proposition of 39 and 44. 39 and 5, that's 44. President Dumas has it at 50, so let's go with her numbers. 50 plus 4 is $54 million plus $200 million. Wow, $254 million to get for us to get one convention hotel? I don't think so. I don't think with a value. That is not a value when I'm coming right back and that property is not used to put another hotel on. $254 million. I mean, a corporate business wouldn't even come with that. That's not a good value. and you don't even own the property. We can't, I asked you the other day, I said, they're putting stuff on here, what do we put? Well, we don't own it, it's up to the Port Authority. It's in the land bank. Usually a lien on the land bank, they would pay it off. It's hard to get my hands around. I know we're saying, oh, we were in a rush, we're trying to get $254 million is very expensive to all we're gonna get is some green space.
And a bit of
That's
context.
where I'm at now. I'm not for, we pay the bills, we in charge when the bills come, and we ain't in charge when it's time to decide what goes there and what money we can bring in. That's where I'm at. I can't see this as a separate issue. Vandercar, I think their issue, they went to court, they won. And I think that possibly they didn't put anything on Millennium because they might have been trying to avoid the pay Vandercar. So they go across the street to another property that they own at the parking garage and turn this into a park, and we still have to pay. So I guess what I'm trying to wrap my hands on is how do we get the deed and make the decision on the Millennium Hotel? Don't tell me we're making it now, because they've already drawn it. It's already, the road they claim is already going to be closed. They already got a name for it. Elm Street Park, already been named. So that's where I'm kind of,
So, Madam Vice President, are you asking the
pickle.
question about expansion of the, or I'm sorry, about building the headquarter hotel on that site? Is that the question you're asking?
Yes.
So let me just provide some
I
context
think that was
to
the issue. If they didn't build it there, they thought they could avoid paying.
Well, no, I think it was a little bit more complicated than that. So
Okay.
that actually was one of the very first, when the property was purchased, from the county's perspective, the concept was put the headquarter hotel there and integrate it with an expanded convention center across Elm Street. That was one of the first plans that was out there. And that was actually a position that the county had advocated for, was expanding the headquarter hotel across Elm Street. Then when we ran some initial, very preliminary financial models on that, we saw that was going to be a heavy lift to expand the convention center across Elm Street and tie it into a privately financed hotel. But it was within reach. It was going to be a heavy lift, but it was within reach. Then COVID happened, and COVID absolutely decimated the county's transient occupancy tax. At that point in time, you can see now we're talking about, do we have enough money to do essentially what amounts to a refresh and a renovation of the existing convention center? We're not even talking about at this point expanding it all across the street. So that is a conversation that is now down the road. And in order to preserve that space for future convention center expansion and also allow the hotel to move forward, the thought was then to put the convention center hotel on that lot to the south and still preserve that space for future convention center expansion, which is ultimately one of the main reasons it was purchased. So there was some dynamics related to COVID with that too. If COVID hadn't happened, we might be having an entirely different conversation about how to use that site across the street.
I'm just, I know I'm outnumbered on this, so I'm sure to move on forward. And not even sure if this is something I should even be involved in, considering I wasn't here. I don't know all the facts, had no input on the front end. And I'm still concerned that the process will not be solved. It's the Millennium today, but if we fund like we've been funding, this $2 million, where is the protection? I don't see any new policy coming in that would protect the taxpayers from site readiness. If Port Authority could go out and they're representing us, or somebody else, we got other people representing us, other entities, and if they don't have to have the indemnification clause, and somehow they're representing us without us even being in the room, don't know what the conversation is, don't know all the particulars, we then put the taxpayers at risk of this type of pattern, if you will, that could go forward in multiple deals, because we're not in the room, we don't know what the deals are. I have some concerns with that, to see if there's any corrective action that protects us going forward. It's not just the Millennium, it's other potential projects that there are quote-unquote representing us. Alloy, other people represent us as well. So I'm still trying to figure out why the indemnification does not apply to those entities, but apply to us. You go on in your memo to us, you indicate for the $5 million, you say, from a processing perspective, I would recommend an initial general fund advance to be repaid with county residual transient occupancy tax proceeds as the fund recovers from the impacts of COVID pandemic. But then you go on to say, while we may reserve the option, I would not recommend at this time tying this payment into future refinancing of hotel occupancy taxing, which I agree with that component. But is it already in this budget that you presented, since it's coming out the general
No,
fund?
Madam Vice President, it is not in this budget. This is a item separately brought up, so that advance would be a reserve against the general fund reserve,
And then,
repaid from occupancy tax.
yeah, I
fund.
understand
Yes,
the
right,
repayment at some time, but the payment is in this particular
The
next
pay-
year?
No, I
Or
didn't.
this year?
It would be brought forward this year, and then it would ultimately be reflected in the budget, correct?
Would it come from this year's budget or next
It
year's?
would come
budget?
from this year's budget.
Boy, you're moving quick. I don't know if we moved that quick with $5 million. So anyway, those are my questions. I guess my initial concern is not, obviously, Vandekar, they won in court. The court heard it. I think it's critical to me that the county was not sued. The county was not asked to testify. The county was not given, saying you must pay this judgment. And it's based on, I guess, a prior board that, I don't know, I guess, was it a resolution you passed to hire them? And
There were, to hire the port,
Yeah.
there was a resolution there were several resolutions that involved the CFA as well, both designating the port as our agent for doing this and then working this process through the CFA for the allocation of the tot to pay the bonds that the port issued.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I don't really, I've got lots of questions. And I understand we definitely wanted to get rid of Millennium Hotel. If I were here, I probably would have brought up a lot of these questions. Commissioner Dumas indicated she brought up a number of these questions. But, sometimes you got to look at the whole picture and how much all this stuff is starting to cost. It's like a spiral web going downward, and at the end of the day, the only thing that the county gets would be, this plot of land that we have over here. We're not getting any property taxes off of it. All we would get is a park, and if I'm not mistaken, parks don't pay property taxes, the green space. And I just have some concerns about where we're headed. So anyway, those are my questions, and if I have others, I guess, before the vote, I will contact your office.
Thank you, Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. I do want to dispel the notion that we, former county commission, made some random decision about the purchase of Millennium, not understanding the consequences nor the upside to the purchase, because we debated this over the course of many meetings. It was a big decision to make. It was a big investment through the TOT, and we did not take that lightly. And so I just don't want people to come away with the impression that we didn't do due diligence here. There was a majority of the board that supported this. As Commissioner Dumas said, she was not in that majority, but it was a decision of the board to make this investment, because without it, we don't have any conversation about the convention center district, additional conventions here, a headquarter hotel. All of that is not contemplated because the Millennium would still stand. So we made a decision about an investment that we thought would be transformational for the convention district, which it has been. And so also, related to the lawsuit, the Port Authority was the obvious partner to do some of this work for the county. This is what they do. And so it made all the sense in the world to engage the port. They did this on our behalf. We were in conversations some not so distant, where we talked about the strategy related to the broker fee and what would need to be paid if we were to do things like continue to appeal a decision of the court, which we were all involved in that conversation. And so decisions have been ongoing related to this. So we have been at the table as a commission making decisions about how to move forward with some of these elements related to the millennium. And so we're in a position now where we have our partner, the port, that did all this work on our behalf, and we understood the contract, we understood the liability. We disagreed strongly with the decision of the court that demolition equals development, and I'm still confused as to what the court's rationale was on that, but the fact of the matter is that was the rationale. And so we're in a position now to finalize this, get it under our belt, pay the extra fee because of the court decision, and move on. And so I too am supportive of moving on this item. You know, it's going to be advanced but then paid back through the TOT, which I think is appropriate. And so I feel like the historical perspective sometimes is lost, especially when it comes to the Millennium Hotel, because we had years of conversations about this. We had years of trying to get control of what we knew was holding back the convention center. 20 years trying to get control of the Millennium Hotel with an out-of-the-country owner who had very little interest in talking to us, or anybody else, the city included, as to what we were going to do with a hotel that was underperforming, that was blighted, that was nearly condemned, and somebody had to take action, and that's what we did. So, you know, I'm not in a position to quarterback at this point, but you know, from my vantage point, that was a good decision. It was a good investment. We have to wrap up this final piece, but all of that to say that there is no convention district update. There is no plan for expansion of convention center. There is no plan for the revitalization of that part of this county without the Millennium coming down. And so that was the calculus when we made the investment. Not everyone agreed at the time, but we now have an opportunity to move forward in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so I just want to say that I obviously stand by that decision. I was a county commissioner at the time, but this was something that we had been dealing with for many, many years, and finally had the opportunity to get this thing under control, and we seized the opportunity, worrying if we would not have the opportunity again. So that's kind of the context around this. So Jeff, if I can ask you a question related to timing. So we need to take action related to this. Is that going to be on the agenda on Thursday?
We could bring it forward as early as Thursday through a bye leave. The issue with timing is that there is interest that applies to a judgment, so interest will accrue on this. So the sooner we can bring it forward, the better off we'll be. So I'd be happy to advance it by leave Thursday. The thought today was just to make sure that there was an appropriate level of transparency, public discussion around the issue. But that ultimately when it did appear on a board meeting, there was more opportunity than just a Thursday on the agenda to talk about it, that we had a full staff meeting to discuss it. But I'm happy to bring it forward Thursday if that's the position of the majority of the board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just a couple comments. The agreement that was signed with the port with Vandekar, as we said earlier, indicated that at the point there was some thought that there was development on the site that we would pay the $5 million. But I mean, if we had not demolished so quickly, we would not be talking about paying the $5 million now because we had not demolished it. If that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense to me. What I'm saying is that why that agreement was signed, I don't know. But I do have to say a little, and I don't want to talk any more about it, but I will have to say, I heard the word due diligence. And that was my primary concern, because I can remember people standing in front of me and saying, We need 2 million by 12 o'clock on Thursday. We need, and then come back, we need 3 million by 3 o'clock, and we were rushing this money out. We need 5 million by this, and maybe my numbers are off. It did not feel good to me. It did not sound good to me when we're rushing these millions and millions out the door so quickly. They're waiting if we don't get it there by 10 or whatever. It just, and so I'm going to leave it alone. Like, as I said, we need to move forward. I agree with moving forward. Why that part was in the agreement as it relates to when development starts, that we pay 5 million. But that was my main, one of my main concerns is that the due diligence happened too quickly. And if you go back and look at the tape, like you were saying, the tape, you'll see me on there saying, did we do our due diligence? And I hear that years and years this had been discussed, but I know when I came, we were just speeding that money out of here so quickly. It just did not feel right to me, and that's why I voted no. But anyway, I don't have a problem with putting it on the agenda for Thursday. It's something that something we need to do, and we need to. I feel we need to move forward on it. So that's where I am on the issue.
Madam President?
Yes.
I wanted to hit on a couple things that was said. Just being in the industry, I wasn't on the commission, but I have brought some very big conventions to Cincinnati with the Millennium Hotel still here. I had access to a study that was done by the Convention and Visitors Bureau, not this group, but the group before. In the thing, I was shocked that they said in the study only 30% of conventions groups said they weren't coming because of the Millennium. And that was shocking to me because I kept hearing, oh, Millennium, Millennium, Millennium. So 70% weren't coming for other reasons. Only 30% said they wasn't coming because of the Millennium Hotel. Now, I was not a champion of the Millennium. I didn't like it at all either. But they were up to date on their property taxes. We were bringing in property taxes. And I think that if we could have possibly gotten a better deal. Now, I wasn't in on what the deal is. But I also want to say that's the reason that I think we should cut back on some of these executive sessions. Because when we come out, we're not allowed to really talk about it. And then they say, oh, we talked about it and we were for it. I got to be clear, I wasn't for it. Whether I'm in behind the scenes or in front of the cameras. These are questions I asked months ago. How in the world are we not indignified? How in the world are we on the hook to pay this? How in the world do they own the property and can sell the property and they get the money? Port Authority. We don't even own the property. I even asked about can it be a way we can be on the deed like a bank? When you go get a loan from a bank, they got 3 or 4 people on there. So before you sell your house, you got to pay these 3, 4 people. Can we put a lien on the property? Oh, we don't want to do that. We want to protect ourselves. Well, how are we protecting ourselves and we still got to pay this money? Now, I don't think Vandekar shouldn't get the money. I'm just saying I don't know if the county should be the one to have to pay it. I'm not a Vandekar, they got their deal or whatever. I'm not saying they shouldn't get the money. My issue is should the county have to be the ones to pay it? And the county taxpayers are paying it because it's coming out the general fund. And then later on, hopefully it'll be paid back if the TOT do well. Now look at the TOT, everything we don't put on the TOT, AKA the CFA. We done put $200 million would come out of the TOT. We done put we got other debts that's in the TOT. Everything's going to the TOT. Now, this TOT must got a whole lot of money to be able to pay all these bills. But what'll happen is the Transit Occupancy Tax, known as the Convention Facility Authority Board, that's the tax that comes in from hotel accommodations. And we get 50% of it, the city gets 50%. So everybody's saying we can get this off of the transit occupancy tax, but it's coming from the taxpayers. So my thing was not so much that Vandekar should not get paid and whatever their agreement was, because I don't know what it was, I wasn't involved, but I'm just wondering how does the taxpayers on the hook to pay it? And if we're on the hook to pay it, then how come we can't own it? And then we say, okay, well, that's the past. Well, I'm in the present, and I can't have no say. I don't want no Elm Street Park over at the Millennium site, but nobody wants to hear what I got to say. But you want me to pay $5 million. Also, if they decide to sell the land, can the port sell it? And if they sell it, who gets the money? Does it come back to us, or does it go to them? So these are the questions that I have. I don't apologize for the questions. If it wasn't my industry, I might take a different look. But it's my industry, they're gonna ask me, now, Reese, you knew better. Why'd you do that? So that's why I'm asking the questions, and all of it, the past and the present combined. Here I am saying, well, that's the past, pay for it, but then in the present, you don't wanna hear what I gotta say. You don't wanna make changes in the budget so this won't happen again. You wanna just keep doing business as usual. And I'm saying, well, wow, can we make a few adjustments? Can we protect ourselves in the future? Can we do something a little bit better? Can we have ownership or some kind of, we're over the land that we've paid for? That's kind of where I'm going. And so those were the reasons that I had those questions. And I just want to say, when they say, well, we already talked about this, I've been saying this, but this is the first time we had a public meeting where I could express those concerns. So thank you for allowing me to express them.
Can I have so just to provide some clarity about the CB, I was on the CBB when that study was conducted with the business community. The president of the commission sits there. I was there for 2 years. And so we had a study, and we had many of the folks that are throughout the country that talk to folks that do conventions in different places, trying to get an understanding of why we're behind in our market set. We're behind in Cincinnati. And so others are doing things. Columbus has done a lot. Nashville's done some stuff. Indianapolis has done it. And so we were trying to understand how we can better compete in our set. And so the thing that always came back was the Millennium Hotel, because nobody wants to stay there. And secondarily, we need expanded exhibit space. Those were the two things. So if you're going to expand the exhibit space, it has to go somewhere. We can't close streets to the north and the south because they're main arteries. So the idea was to expand to the east where the Millennium sits. And so the Millennium in and of itself was a problem, but also the location of the Millennium was a problem, because if there were to be an expansion in the future, and I think in many, many years, perhaps we get there with an expansion, the idea is it has to go somewhere, so it has to go to the east. And the Millennium was keeping us from doing that as well. And so taking control and demolishing the Millennium had a two-purpose benefit to us. One was getting it out of the market. The other was freeing up the site for an expansion in the future. So I just want to be clear that that study that has been referred to was hitting that on both pieces, but the Millennium was at the core of both of the concerns, the top concerns from the industry experts that participated in that study for the CBB.
Okay. Is that it? Okay. With no further business coming before the board, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Thank you.